If an aircraft loses lift at 200 feet, there is no recovery margin. If it descends over a frozen river, there is no soft landing. And if you enter water near freezing, you do not have time to decide what to do next. On January 13, 1982, in the center of Washington, D.C., all three variables aligned. Winter systems had stalled over the East Coast for days. Snowfall accumulated faster than removal crews could clear it. Runways required constant plowing. Taxiways narrowed. Aircraft departure spacing increased. Every minute on the ground allowed additional ice accumulation. At what is now Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, departure boards reflected delay after delay. Aircraft required de-icing fluid heated and sprayed across wings and control surfaces. That fluid has a holdover time. It protects only for a defined window depending on precipitation rate and temperature. If snowfall continues beyond that window, protection degrades. Lift degradation does not require visible sheets of ice. Even thin contamination changes airflow separation points. Air Florida Flight 90 was a Boeing 737-222. Two Pratt & Whitney JT8D engines mounted under swept wings. Mechanical systems dependent on accurate sensor input. 87 people on board. Passengers. Cabin crew. Flight crew. Routine commercial service. Snow entered engine inlets during taxi behind another aircraft. Exhaust from the aircraft ahead may have melted accumulated snow. Then refreezing occurred inside the engine compressor sections. Engine pressure ratio indicators displayed values higher than actual thrust output. Instrumentation can mislead when inlet distortion occurs. The crew began takeoff roll at 4:01 p.m. Acceleration appeared marginal. But snow-covered visual cues distort perception of speed. Runway length diminishes rapidly when thrust is reduced. Rotation occurred near the end of pavement. The aircraft lifted. But climb rate was insufficient. Angle of attack increased. Stall warning stick shaker activated. Engine thrust was not producing expected performance. Seconds matter at low altitude. There was no time for complex troubleshooting. The aircraft crossed the 14th Street Bridge at approximately car height above traffic. Motorists saw landing gear and belly structure overhead. The left wing struck vehicles. Bridge guardrails sheared. Four motorists died instantly. The aircraft continued briefly. Then descended into the Potomac River. Water impact fractured the fuselage into major sections. Cabin rows separated. Debris scattered. Fuel spread in iridescent layers across the surface. Ice fragments floated among seat cushions and torn aluminum. The Potomac in January measures near 1 degree Celsius. At that temperature, cold shock response begins within seconds. An involuntary gasp reflex. Rapid hyperventilation up to 10 times normal rate. Loss of breath control. If submerged during initial gasp, drowning can occur immediately. 6 individuals remained visible above the surface. They clung to debris. Section of tail. Floating insulation. Seat frames. Each movement accelerated heat loss. Cold water extracts heat 25 times faster than air at identical temperature. Peripheral vasoconstriction begins instantly. Blood shifts toward core. Hands lose function first. Grip strength decreases sharply after 5 minutes. Coordinated swimming becomes difficult after 10. Emergency services responded across Washington simultaneously. Fire apparatus navigated snow-clogged streets. Police units diverted traffic from the bridge. Medical teams prepared for hypothermia treatment. A U.S. Park Police helicopter launched despite reduced visibility. Hovering above a river in winter introduces aerodynamic instability. Rotor wash pushes floating debris outward. Snowfall obscures depth perception. Fuel limits restrict hover duration. The helicopter crew identified survivors. A rescue line with a flotation ring was lowered. It drifted toward flight attendant Kelly Duncan. She secured it. The winch lifted her upward through rotor wash and blowing snow. The helicopter returned to the debris field. Another line descended toward Arlen D. Williams Jr. He grasped the ring. But instead of securing himself, he passed it to another passenger. This transfer occurred multiple times. 5 survivors were lifted in sequence. Each extraction required stabilization. Each hoist consumed precious seconds of thermal margin. Hypothermia progression follows predictable stages. Below 35 degrees Celsius core temperature, shivering intensifies. Below 33, cognitive impairment develops. Below 32, cardiac instability risk increases. In water at 1 degree, that decline accelerates rapidly. When the helicopter returned for Williams, he no longer responded. Muscle control had failed. He slipped beneath the surface before he could be secured. On the bridge, civilian Lenny Skutnik observed another survivor beyond reach of the rescue line. He removed his coat, entered the river voluntarily, swam through debris and oil sheen. Cold water immersion for unprotected individuals typically produces incapacitation within minutes. Distance to shore was short enough to permit return before loss of function. He reached the passenger, assisted her toward safety. Divers later recovered additional victims from submerged sections. Visibility underwater was near zero. Ice fragments complicated entry. Aircraft fuselage sections rested partially submerged in shifting current. Of 87 aboard the aircraft, only 5 survived. 4 motorists on the bridge were killed. Total fatalities reached 78 from the plane plus 4 on the bridge. Investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board reconstructed events. They examined cockpit voice recordings, engine performance data, de-icing procedures, crew resource management, sensor interpretation under icing conditions. Findings concluded that inadequate engine anti-ice usage, snow ingestion, and failure to respond effectively to abnormal instrument readings contributed to loss of lift. No single error acted alone. Environmental stress reduced performance margins. Procedural lapses narrowed them further. Bridges and airports resumed operation. Snow was cleared. River traffic normalized. But changes followed. Revised de-icing holdover time charts were standardized. Crew training emphasized winter operations. Airline procedures incorporated stricter anti-ice requirements. Cockpit communication protocols strengthened. The 14th Street Bridge span was later renamed in honor of Arlen D. Williams Jr. Recognition acknowledged action under lethal exposure conditions. But physics did not change. Cold water immersion at 0 to 4 degrees Celsius still allows approximately 10 to 15 minutes of meaningful movement. After 30 minutes, unconsciousness likelihood rises sharply. After 60, mortality probability increases dramatically without protective gear. Modern aircraft include improved icing detection systems. Helicopters now deploy enhanced rescue equipment. Yet ice accumulation remains aerodynamic contamination. Water remains a heat sink. Human physiology remains vulnerable. Extreme survival is often depicted as remote wilderness isolation. Yet this event occurred within sight of federal buildings. Within a mile of highways. Under a bridge filled with commuters. Isolation can exist inside a city when environment overwhelms system integrity. Survival that day depended on minutes. On hover stability measured in feet. On line deployment accuracy measured in inches. On decisions made before cognitive decline from cold. The Potomac continued to flow after sunset. Ice drifted downstream toward the Chesapeake Bay. Snow tapered. Emergency vehicles cleared the scene. But between impact and extraction, a narrow interval existed where outcome remained uncertain. Cold does not pause for instruction. Water does not soften on contact. Lift does not increase because it is needed. Survival in extreme environments is not cinematic heroism. It is controlled response inside hostile physics. On January 13, 1982, 5 individuals were removed from freezing water within that narrow operational window. They survived because intervention aligned with physiology before collapse occurred. Because aircraft crews maintained hover inside a snowstorm. Because a civilian entered lethal water voluntarily. Because one passenger chose others before himself. The river remained cold. Winter continued. Aircraft continued departing runways across the country. But on that afternoon, minutes determined outcome. And 5 people stepped back onto land. Alive.